Wife's secret lover was my boss. My revenge shook their world. Chapter 1. The Shattered Illusion. The rain came down in sheets that night. A relentless assault on the windows of our two-story home in the quiet suburbs of Millwood. It was March 18, 2025, and the world outside mirrored the chaos brewing within me. I stood in the kitchen, the overhead light flickering faintly, casting jagged shadows across the marble counter. A bottle of Jack Daniels sat open beside me, its amber contents dwindling with each pour into the tumbler I clutched like a lifeline. My hands trembled not from the cold, but from the weight of what I'd seen. 3 days ago, I'd been downtown, grabbing a coffee after a late meeting at Grayson Enterprises. The Starbucks was crowded, the air thick with the hum of conversation, when I spotted her through the window. Emily, my wife of 7 years, stood on the sidewalk, her auburn hair catching the golden glow of the setting sun. She was laughing, her head tilted back in a way I hadn't seen in months. And then she slid into the passenger seat of a black Mercedes-Benz S-Class. Not just any car, his car. Victor Grayson, my boss, the CEO of Grayson Enterprises, the man who'd plucked me from obscurity 5 years ago and molded me into his VP of operations. I'd frozen, the coffee cup scalding my palm, telling myself it was nothing. A ride home. A coincidence. But the image had lodged in my brain like a splinter, festering until I couldn't ignore it. I'd hired a private investigator the next day, a gruff ex-cop named Malone, with a nicotine-stained mustache and a knack for discretion. He'd delivered the first photos last night. Emily and Victor, locked in an embrace outside his penthouse, her arms around his neck, his hands on her waist, their lips a breath apart. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. My stomach had churned, bile rising as I stared at the evidence of their betrayal. 7 years of marriage, countless late nights supporting her dreams, and this was my reward. "Ethan, you're home early," Emily's voice sliced through the fog of my thoughts. She stood in the kitchen doorway, her raincoat dripping onto the hardwood floor, her green eyes wide with a smile that didn't reach them. Her hair was damp, clinging to her cheeks, and she carried the faint scent of lavender, her perfume. Or maybe his cologne. I didn't look up, just swirled the whiskey in my glass. "Am I?" I said, my voice low, edged with something dark. "Or maybe I'm just in time. What's that supposed to mean?" I set the bottle down with a deliberate thud, the sound echoing in the silent house. Pulling my phone from my pocket, I opened the photo gallery and slid it across the counter. The screen lit up with the image of her and Victor, frozen in their illicit moment. "Explain this." Emily's breath hitched, her face draining of color as she stared at the photo. Her hands flew to her mouth, then dropped, trembling. "Ethan, I can explain." "Save it," I snapped, cutting her off. My voice was a blade, sharp and cold. How long have you been screwing my boss?" She flinched as if I'd struck her, her eyes darting to the floor, then back to me. The silence stretched, taut and suffocating, until she whispered, 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies. 6 months of her slipping into bed beside me, her skin still warm from his touch, while I worked late to impress the man who was stealing my life. 6 months of Victor calling me his guy, clapping me on the back, handing me a promotion last week with a smug grin, all while he laughed behind my back. The whiskey burned as I tossed it back, the glass shaking in my grip. "Get out," I said, my voice a low growl. "Ethan, please." Tears welled in her eyes, her hand reaching for me across the counter. "Get out," I roared, hurling the glass at the floor. It shattered, shards exploding across the tiles like the fragments of our marriage. She stumbled back, a sob breaking from her throat, then turned and fled into the storm. The door slammed shut, the sound reverberating through the empty house. I stood there, chest heaving, the rain hammering outside. The pieces of my life lay scattered around me, broken glass, broken trust, broken vows. But this wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. They'd taken everything from me, and now they'd pay. Chapter 2. The King's Court. The next morning, I walked into Grayson Enterprises like a man on a mission. The building was a sleek monolith of glass and steel, towering over downtown Millwood, a testament to Victor Grayson's ambition. I'd spent 5 years here, clawing my way up from junior analyst to VP of operations, all under his wing. He'd seen potential in me, a scrappy kid from the wrong side of town with a knack for numbers, and turned me into his protege. "You're my right hand, Ethan," he'd say, his voice dripping with that patronizing warmth. "The future of this company." Now I saw it for what it was, a leash to keep me close while he took what was mine. His office was on the 35th floor, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. The walls were lined with awards, photos of him shaking hands with senators and tech moguls, a shrine to his ego. I knocked once, a sharp rap, and pushed the door open without waiting. "Ethan, my man," Victor's voice boomed, warm and oblivious. He lounged behind his desk, feet propped up, a cigar smoldering in the ashtray. At 45, he was still striking, dark hair streaked with silver, piercing blue eyes, a jawline that could cut glass. He wore a tailored suit, the kind that cost more than my first car, and exuded the confidence, peaked cap badge of confidence. "What brings you up to the penthouse?" I forced a smile, the kind that didn't reach my eyes, a mask over the rage simmering beneath. "Just wanted to talk about the merger. You've got big plans, don't you?" He grinned, puffing on the cigar, the smoke curling lazily upward. "Oh, you bet. This deal with Klein Corp's my legacy. 50 million in assets, a foothold in Asia, and a board that'll kiss my ring when it's done. Couldn't do it without you, Ethan. You're my right hand." "Right hand," I echoed, the words bitter on my tongue. Funny choice of words. His brow furrowed, a flicker of confusion crossing his face, but I pressed on before he could dwell on it. I dropped a thick folder onto his desk, financial projections for the merger, meticulously crafted over the past 12 hours in the dark of my home office, except they weren't accurate. I'd buried subtle errors in the numbers, revenue forecasts inflated by 10 million, a fake tax liability tucked into the fine print, cash flow skewed to suggest a liquidity crisis. It was a masterpiece of sabotage disguised as diligence. "Take a look at these when you get a chance," I said, keeping my tone casual, professional. "Sure thing," he replied, tapping the folder with a manicured finger. "Hey, dinner tonight? Bring Emily. We'll celebrate." Her name hit me like a fist to the gut. My jaw tightened, but I nodded, forcing the words out. "Yeah, we'll see." As I turned to leave, he called after me, "You're a good man, Ethan. Loyal. Don't ever change." I didn't respond. Loyalty was a currency he'd spent, and now he'd pay the price. Back at my desk, I noticed something, or rather, someone. Rachel Carter, a senior analyst who'd been with the company almost as long as me. She was sharp, ambitious, and perpetually overlooked by Victor in favor of his inner circle of yes-men. Today, she lingered near my office, her dark eyes flicking toward me with an intensity that wasn't typical. We'd never been close, but I'd always respected her work. Now, I wondered if she'd seen something, knew something. "Everything okay, Ethan?" she asked, her voice low, probing. I met her gaze, weighing my options. "Just a long night. You?" She hesitated, then said, "I heard Victor's been distracted lately. Thought you might know why." The hairs on my neck prickled. Did she suspect? Or was she fishing? "He's got a lot on his plate," I said, deflecting. "The merger's a beast." She nodded, but her eyes lingered a moment too long before she walked away. I filed it away. Rachel could be an ally or a threat. Either way, I'd need to watch her. Chapter 3, The Seeds of Chaos. That night, I didn't go to dinner. I went to war. Step 1 was the evidence. Malone had delivered a gold mine, not just photos, but a trove of digital dirt. Texts between Emily and Victor, pulled from her phone's cloud backup, sloppy of her to leave it accessible. One from 3 months ago read, "Ethan's clueless. Meet me at the Ritz tonight. Wear the blue tie like it." Another from Victor, "He's my best pawn. Keeps the board happy while we live a little." There were emails too, sent through Victor's personal account, and a hotel receipt from the Ritz, charged to his corporate card. They hadn't just been careless, they'd been arrogant. I sat at my desk, the glow of my laptop the only light in the room, and created an anonymous X account, Grayson Truth. With a few clicks, I uploaded the files, tagging Grayson Enterprises' biggest client, Klein Corp. Technova, Horizon Ventures. The posts were concise, but lethal. CEO Victor Grayson's affair with employee's wife, proof inside. Is this who you trust with your millions? A link to a cloud drive followed, packed with every damning detail: photos, texts, receipts. I hit post, and the digital wildfire began to spread. Step 2 was the merger. Those projections I'd given Victor were my poison pen. I'd spent hours tweaking them, inflating profits by millions, burying liabilities, and crafting a narrative of instability. When Klein Corp's auditors dug in, and they would, once the affair leaked, they'd see fraud, incompetence, or both. The deal would collapse, and Victor's legacy would crumble with it. Step 3 was Emily. She'd been texting me all day, a desperate barrage of messages. Ethan, I'm so sorry. Let's talk. I love you. I ignored them until evening, then replied with cold precision. Diner on 5th, 8 p.m. Be there, not for reconciliation, for leverage. The diner was a relic, its neon sign flickering, the air thick with grease and regret. I slid into a booth, the vinyl creaking under me, and watched her walk in. She looked like a ghost of herself, eyes red and swollen, hair tangled, hands fidgeting with her purse. She slid in across from me, her voice barely a whisper. You look awful, she said, her gaze searching mine. You don't get to care, I replied, my tone ice cold. But you can help me fix this. Fix it, she frowned, confusion etching her features. Ethan, I'm so sorry. Shut up and listen, I cut in, leaning forward. Victor's going down. You're going to help me make sure of it. What are you talking about? I slid a burner phone across the table, its screen glowing with Victor's private number pre-dialed. You're going to call him. Tell him you're pregnant. Say it's his. He'll panic, and when he does, I'll record it all. Her eyes widened, horror dawning. Ethan, that's insane. I'm not pregnant. He doesn't know that, I said, my voice unyielding. Do it, or I send everything I have to your parents, your sister, your precious yoga group, everyone. You'll be the town pariah by sunrise. She stared at me, tears spilling over, her hands trembling. You've changed. No, I hissed, my voice a blade. You changed me. She hesitated, then picked up the phone, her fingers shaking as she dialed. I slipped into the shadows of the diner's back room, the burner's speaker patched to a recording app on my laptop. Victor answered on the third ring, his voice clipped, irritated. Emily, what's this about? It's late. Victor, her voice broke, a sob so convincing I almost believed it myself. I'm pregnant. It's yours. A long silence, then a string of curses erupted. Pregnant? How the hell did this happen? What about Ethan? I don't know, she cried, her performance flawless. I'm scared, Victor. All right, he growled, panic creeping in. Meet me at the penthouse. We'll figure this out. Don't tell anyone. I ended the recording, a grin splitting my face. The trap was set. Chapter 4, The Ally and the Enemy. The next day, Rachel cornered me in the break room. The office was buzzing, whispers of the ex-posts already circulating, though no one dared say it aloud, not yet. You've been busy, she said, her voice low, her dark eyes piercing. I poured coffee, keeping my expression neutral. Just doing my job. She stepped closer, her tone conspiratorial. I saw the posts. Victor's affair, it's true, isn't it? I met her gaze, weighing my next move. She could be a loose end or a weapon. What's it to you? I've been passed over for promotions 3 times because of him, she said, bitterness lacing her words. He's a snake. If you're taking him down, I want in. I studied her, calculating. What do you bring to the table? Access, she replied. I've got dirt on his offshore accounts, unreported funds he's funneled through shell companies. Enough to bury him with the IRS. A slow smile spread across my face. You're in. She nodded, a spark of vengeance in her eyes. When do we strike? Tonight, I said. Victor's meeting Emily. We'll be there. Chapter 5, The Reckoning. Victor's penthouse was his fortress, a sprawling loft with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Millwood's skyline. I'd swiped a key months ago during a team-building retreat, a detail I'd forgotten, until it became my ace. Rachel and I arrived under cover of darkness, letting ourselves in silently. The faint hum of jazz drifted from his sound system, masking our footsteps. Emily was already there, pacing in a silk robe, her face pale. Victor stood at the bar, pouring a double scotch, his movements jerky. uncomposed, a far cry from the king I'd known. Ethan, Victor froze, the glass halfway to his lips, his eyes narrowing as he spotted me. Then he saw Rachel, and confusion turned to fury. "What the hell is this?" "Surprise," I said, stepping into the light. I held up my phone. The at Grayson Truth, posts live and trending -- Grayson scandal was top 5. "Your empire's burning, Vic. Clients are bailing. Clients pulling out. And this?" I hit play on the pregnancy recording, his voice echoing through the room. "Pregnant. How the hell did this happen?" Emily gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Ethan, you said." I lied. I cut her off, my eyes locked on Victor. "Like you lied to me." He lunged, fury twisting his face, but I sidestepped, letting him crash into the bar. Bottles shattered, liquor pooling on the floor. Rachel stepped forward, holding up a USB drive. "Offshore accounts," she said coolly. $10 million in unreported funds. "The IRS will love this." Victor staggered up, blood trickling from a cut on his brow, his voice a snarl. "You're finished, both of you." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You're finished. The board's meeting now. Klein's suing. And Emily? She's got nothing left to offer you." He charged again, but Rachel was ready, tripping him with a swift kick. He hit the floor hard, groaning. I tossed the USB drive beside him. "Enjoy prison," I said, then turned to Emily. "You're next." She sobbed, collapsing against the wall. "Ethan, I loved you." "Save it for someone who cares," I said, and walked out, Rachel at my side. The door slammed behind us, locking automatically, trapping them in their ruin. Chapter 6: The Ashes and the Phoenix. The sun rose over Millwood on March 25, 2025, a week after the penthouse showdown that had razed Victor Grayson's empire to the ground. Its golden rays pierced the morning mist, bathing the city in a deceptive glow of renewal. From the balcony of my new apartment, a sleek, modern unit on the 15th floor of a high-rise downtown, I watched the skyline shift. From shadow to light, the air was crisp, carrying the faint tang of spring, a stark contrast to the storm that had raged through my life just days ago. In my hand, a tumbler of whiskey gleamed, catching the dawn like a shard of the chaos I'd left behind. I raised it in a silent toast, not to victory, but to survival. Grayson Enterprises was a husk now, its name synonymous with scandal. The ex-posts from Grayson Truth had spread like wildfire, igniting a media frenzy that consumed Victor's reputation in hours. By noon that first day, Klein Corp had pulled out of the merger, citing gross misrepresentation in the financials, those doctored projections. I'd slipped into Victor's hands. Technova and Horizon Ventures followed suit, their CEOs issuing statements dripping with sanctimony about ethical leadership. The board called an emergency meeting that night, and by midnight, Victor was outfired, stripped of his title, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale. The affair was the match that lit the fuse, but Rachel's USB drive was the dynamite. Those offshore accounts, $10 million funneled through shell companies in the Cayman Islands, hit the IRS like a sledgehammer. Federal agents raided Victor's penthouse 2 days later, carting out boxes of documents while paparazzi swarmed the street below. The tabloids ran wild. CEO's secret love child scandal screamed one headline, latching onto the fake pregnancy I'd orchestrated with Emily. Another, more vicious, read Grayson's fall, from boardroom to bedroom betrayal. Victor's face was everywhere, red-eyed, disheveled, a king dethroned. Emily vanished in the chaos. The last I'd seen of her was that night in the penthouse, crumpled against the wall, sobbing as Rachel and I walked out. By morning, her apartment where she'd been crashing since I'd kicked her out was empty. Her phone disconnected. Rumors swirled. She'd fled to her sister's in Chicago, or maybe out of the country altogether. The tabloids tracked her for a day or two, but she was a footnote in Victor's implosion. Her name a punchline whispered in Millwood's coffee shops and yoga studios. I didn't care where she'd gone. She'd made her choice 6 months ago, and I'd made mine. I took a sip of whiskey, the burn grounding me as I replayed the week's events. Revenge hadn't filled the void they'd carved in me. It didn't stitch back the trust they'd shredded or quiet the rage that still simmered beneath my skin. But it had given me something else, a cold, sharp clarity, a new path through the ruins. I'd shaken their world to its foundations, and now I stood atop the rubble, figuring out what came next. The severance package from Grayson Enterprises arrived that Monday, a 7-figure check deposited quietly into my account. It was hush money, a desperate bid by the board to keep me from suing or leaking more dirt. I didn't need their silence, I'd already said my piece, but I took the cash. It bought this apartment, with its hardwood floors and floor-to-ceiling windows, a far cry from the suburban house I'd shared with Emily. That place was on the market now. It's for sale, a sign of final severing of the life we'd built. Klein Corp called the same day. Their VP of strategy, a weary man named Paul Hensley, offering me a job. We were impressed, he'd said over the phone, his voice smooth as polished steel. Your attention to detail in exposing Grayson's fraud, it's the kind of foresight we need. Director of Operations, 6 figures, full benefits. What do you say? I'd paused, staring out at the city from my half-unpacked living room. Why me? I'm the guy who burned his own company down. Hensley chuckled, unfazed. You're the guy who saw the rot and cut it out. That's loyalty to the truth, not to a man. We'll email you the contract. The offer was a lifeline, a chance to rebuild. I signed it that night, the ink still wet as I poured another drink. Klein didn't know the half of it. My foresight was vengeance. Not virtue, but I'd take their faith and turn it into something real. Rachel got her own reward. Klein poached her from Grayson's sinking ship, naming her head of their new risk assessment division. We met for coffee that Wednesday, a quiet cafe tucked away from the downtown bustle. She looked different, sharper, somehow, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes bright with a fire I hadn't noticed before. You did it, she said, stirring sugar into her latte. Victor's toast, and we're still standing. We did it, I corrected, leaning back in my chair. That USB drive was the knockout punch. She smirked, a rare crack in her usual reserve. I've been sitting on that data for a year, waiting for the right moment. You gave me the opening. Why'd you hate him so much? I asked, curious now that the dust had settled. Her smirk faded, her gaze dropping to the table. 3 promotions passed me over to went to his frat boy buddies. One to a guy who couldn't spell spreadsheet. Victor didn't just overlook me, he laughed about it. Called me the diversity hire behind my back. I heard him once, at a Christmas party. Thought I'd forgotten. I nodded, the pieces clicking. So this was personal for you too. Damn right it was, she said, her voice low, fierce. But it's done now. We're free. Free, I echoed, tasting the word. It didn't feel real yet, not with the ghosts of Emily and Victor still haunting my thoughts. That afternoon, I got a call I didn't expect. Malone, the pie, his gravelly voice cutting through the line. Got something for you, kid. You're not gonna like it. Spit it out, I said, pacing the apartment, the whiskey bottle within reach. Emily's not in Chicago, he said. She's holed up in a motel off Route 12, 20 miles outside Millwood. Checked in under a fake name, Jane Carter. But that's not the kicker. My pulse quickened. What is? She's not alone, Malone said. Victor's with her. Saw his Mercedes in the lot. Plates match. They're laying low, probably plotting something. The room tilted, rage flaring anew. You're sure? Got photos, he said. Sending 'em now. What do you want me to do? I opened the email as he spoke, the images loading one by one. Emily stepping out of room 14. Her hair hidden under a baseball cap. Victor ducking into the same room. His face shadowed but unmistakable. The timestamp was yesterday. 3:42 p.m. They weren't running, they were regrouping. Keep eyes on them, I said, my voice tight. I'll handle it. I hung up, staring at the photos, my mind racing. I'd thought they were finished, Victor disgraced, Emily broken. But here they were, scheming in the ashes. The whiskey bottle called, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't over. I called Rachel that night, filling her in. She arrived at my place within the hour, her laptop under her arm, her expression grim. They're not done, I said, pacing the living room as she sat up at the dining table. Victor's got nothing left to lose, and Emily's desperate. They'll come for me or Klein. Rachel nodded, pulling up an encrypted file. I've still got access to Grayson's old server's backdoors I built when I suspected he was dirty. Let's see what they're hiding. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of code scrolling past. After 10 minutes, she froze. Holy shit. What? I leaned over her shoulder, the screen glowing with an email chain. Victor's been in touch with a lawyer, she said. Not just any lawyer, Marcus Tate, big shot from New York. Specializes in corporate revenge suits. Look at this. The email was dated 2 days ago. Ethan Carter framed me. Doctored financials, planted evidence. I've got proof. Emily's testimony. We sue Klein for hiring him. Claim conspiracy. Need your muscle to bury them. Attached was a draft affidavit, signed by Emily, alleging I'd coerced her into the pregnancy lie and sabotaged Victor out of spite. My blood ran cold. They're flipping it, making me the villain. Rachel scrolled further, her jaw tightening. There's more. Victor's got a contact at Technova, some exec he bribed years ago. They're offering to testify the merger was solid until you tanked it. If this holds, Klein's exposed, and you're toast. I sank into a chair, the weight of it crushing. I'd outmaneuvered them once, but they'd adapted, turning my own weapons against me. What do we do? Rachel's eyes narrowed, a predator's glint. We hit back harder. They've got no idea what's coming. The next day, we went to work. Rachel dug deeper into Victor's servers, unearthing a trove of dirty mails proving his Technova bribe. Audio of him boasting about tax evasion, even a video of him berating Emily, calling her a means to an end. It was raw, unfiltered, and damning. I met Malone at noon, handing him a flash drive. Get this to the feds, I said, anonymously. Tell them it's from a whistleblower inside Grayson. He grunted, pocketing it. They're still at the motel. Fighting a lot. Heard M through the wall. She wants out. He's not letting her go. Good, I said. Let them tear each other apart. That night, Rachel and I launched Phase 2, using Grayson Truth. We posted the new evidence, audio clips, emails, the video tagging the IRS, FBI, and every major news outlet. The caption read, Victor Grayson's lies unravel proof of corruption, coercion, and collapse. Justice served. Within hours, #Grayson Down trended worldwide, the internet erupting with outrage. The feds moved fast. By dawn, Victor's motel room was swarming with agents. Footage hit Exum in handcuffs, snarling as they dragged him to a black SUV, Emily in tears. Escorted separately, her cap gone, her face exposed. The headlines shifted. Grayson arrested in fraud, sting, and mistress turns witness. I stood on the balcony again. A week later, the city quiet below. Victor was in custody, facing decades if the charges stuck, and they would, with Rachel's evidence. Emily cut a deal, testifying against him for immunity. Her betrayal of me now her lifeline. Klein doubled my salary, calling me a hero of transparency. Rachel thrived, her division expanding, her name whispered as a rising star. The whiskey was gone now, replaced by coffee, its bitterness a fitting companion. Revenge hadn't healed me the scars of Emily's lies, Victor's treachery. Still ached, but it had forged something new. I'd burned their world to ash, and from it, I'd risen. Not whole, not happy, but alive, and that was enough.